The evening sky burned orange as the moving truck rolled slowly over the dusty road that led to the new property. The Carter family had driven for hours, leaving behind the noise of the city and the busy streets for a quieter life. Their new land stretched wide and open, bordered by a crooked fence and a forest that seemed to watch them with silent eyes. The neighbors had told them the land was empty for decades, nothing but grass and stones, but to the Carters it felt like more than just empty ground. The father, Mark, stepped out first and breathed deep, telling his wife Anna and their 2 children that this place would finally give them peace. The children, Emily and Jacob, ran through the tall grass, their laughter echoing through the valley. Yet even in their joy there was a strange heaviness in the air, a weight they could not name. The sun slipped lower, and shadows stretched across the ground like long fingers reaching for their feet. Mark noticed the silence of the place. There were no birds singing, no sound of insects, just the wind pushing softly against the grass. Anna shivered and pulled her jacket tight, though the air was not cold. Emily stopped running suddenly, and pointed to the ground where the grass had bent in a circle, as if something had once been tied there. Her voice trembled as she asked her father if someone had camped here before. Mark told her it was nothing, just an old patch of earth, but his eyes lingered too long on the strange marks before turning away. That night the family unpacked inside their small new house at the edge of the land. The wooden floors creaked, and every sound carried loud through the empty rooms. Jacob lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind scrape against the window, but then another sound reached his ears, something low and deep, almost like breathing, rising from beneath the ground. He pressed his ear against the floorboards, holding his breath, and he swore he heard it again, a steady rhythm of something alive in the earth. Too afraid to speak, he pulled the blanket over his head and tried to convince himself it was only the wind. Outside, the night grew darker, the moon hidden behind thick clouds, and the forest seemed to move with shadows of its own. Far away, a single light shone from a neighbor's house, but no one came to welcome them that night. In the morning, the family explored more of the property. Mark carried tools to start clearing the land, Anna walked with Emily gathering wildflowers, and Jacob lagged behind, staring at the ground where he thought the breathing had come from. He kicked at the dirt and felt it ring hard, almost metallic, beneath his shoes. When he knelt to dig, his hand brushed something cold just under the soil, like a chain buried deep. Before he could pull more, his father called him back, and Jacob left it alone, though his heart thudded with unease. The neighbors finally visited that afternoon, smiling too wide, their voices too careful. They said it was good to see new life on the land, though their eyes flickered nervously toward the ground whenever the children ran too far. One older man warned Mark not to dig too deep, laughing as if it were a joke, but his laugh was hollow, and his hands trembled as he gripped his cane. That night, the noises returned stronger, the sound of something shifting far below. Emily woke from a dream in which she saw a golden eye watching her from under the soil. She told Anna about it, but her mother brushed it aside, saying dreams were only dreams. Still, when Emily walked outside in the morning, she saw strange impressions in the grass, large and heavy, as if something had pressed against the earth from below, desperate to rise. The family felt it too, though none dared to speak it aloud. They had come searching for peace and safety, but the land did not rest, and whatever was buried here was not silent anymore. The next morning came with a pale sun hidden behind gray clouds, and the land seemed even more silent than before, as if holding its breath. Mark decided it was time to clear the weeds and stones from the property, to make space for a garden. He carried a shovel, while Anna gathered tools, and the children followed behind, curious and restless. As they worked, the shovel struck something hard beneath the soil. At first Mark thought it was just another rock, but when he bent down to dig it free, he uncovered a piece of metal, dark and rusted, shaped like a heavy link. His brows furrowed as he scraped more dirt away, finding another link, and then another, all connected in a chain that seemed to stretch deep into the earth. Emily stared wide-eyed and asked why there would be chains buried in their yard. Mark forced a laugh, saying it must be old equipment left behind long ago, maybe from farmers or builders, but his voice shook a little, betraying the unease that crawled up his spine. He tried to pull one length free, but the ground seemed to hold tight, as if refusing to let go. Jacob dropped to his knees beside him, running his hand along the chain, and whispered that it felt warm, almost alive. Anna told him not to say such things, but when she touched it herself, a shiver ran through her fingers, like a faint vibration humming beneath the metal. They all stood still, listening, and for a brief moment the ground seemed to sigh, a low breath rising from below. Mark quickly covered the chain again with dirt and told everyone to keep working somewhere else. He tried to act calm, but inside he was unsettled, as if they had touched something forbidden. Later that day, Jacob couldn't stop thinking about it. When his parents were busy, he sneaked back to the spot and dug deeper. The soil gave way easily, as though it wanted to reveal its secret. Soon he found not only the chain, but also something else: scales, dark and shining faintly in the dim light. They were massive, each one larger than his hand, hard like stone yet smooth like glass. His breath caught in his throat as he realized this was no machine, no relic of men. It was something alive, something huge. His trembling fingers reached out, brushing against one of the scales, and suddenly the ground shook faintly as if a heart was beating below. Jacob stumbled back, his pulse racing, and ran to find Emily. She didn't believe him at first, but curiosity led her to the spot. Together they dug a little more until they uncovered a shape unmistakably living. An eyelid, closed tight, but twitching as though something inside was trying to wake. Emily gasped and nearly screamed, but Jacob covered her mouth. They stared in silence, terror and wonder mixing in their young faces. The eye beneath the lid moved, shifting, and then, just for a second, it opened. A sliver of gold light pierced through the dirt, sharp and bright, locking onto them. They froze, unable to breathe, feeling as if the earth itself was watching. Then the eyelid slid shut again, and the glow vanished. Emily wanted to run, but Jacob whispered that they couldn't tell their parents, not yet, not until they understood what it was. That evening, the neighbors came again, bringing bread and smiling politely. But their eyes seemed to search the Carter's yard too carefully, as if hunting for something. One woman asked casually if the children had found anything unusual while playing. Mark said no, though his mind lingered on the chains he had uncovered. The neighbors exchanged a look, quick but sharp, before changing the subject. After they left, Emily tugged at her father's sleeve and wanted to speak, but Jacob shook his head firmly, warning her with his eyes to stay silent. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She tossed in bed, haunted by the golden eye that had looked at her. Finally she rose and padded softly to Jacob's room. He was already awake, sitting by the window, staring at the yard where the chains lay hidden. When she asked what he was thinking, he whispered that the creature wasn't dangerous, at least not yet. It was trapped, weak, and maybe it needed their help. Emily shook her head, saying no, saying it was too big and too strange, but Jacob told her he had heard it. In the silence of the night, when the house was still, he claimed he could hear a voice, not in his ears but in his mind. The voice was faint, desperate, begging to be freed. Emily trembled, afraid he was right. As the moon slid from behind the clouds, its light touched the field, and the children could see the ground shifting ever so slightly, rising and falling as though something below was breathing. The land they had thought was empty no longer seemed empty at all. Something ancient lay beneath their feet, chained and waiting, and whether it was friend or foe, they did not know. But the truth was clear: their new home was hiding a secret no family should ever have found. That night the wind howled through the trees, rattling the shutters of the Carter family's small house. Everyone had gone to bed, but Jacob lay awake, staring at the ceiling, heart beating fast with a feeling he could not explain. He pulled the blanket up to his chin and closed his eyes, trying to force himself to sleep. At first there was silence, then a faint sound, softer than a whisper, brushing against his thoughts. It was not a voice he heard with his ears, it was inside his head. The words were broken, heavy with pain. "Help! Free me!" Jacob sat upright in bed, gasping, and looked around the room. Emily was asleep across the hall, his parents in their room, the house still and quiet. Yet the voice echoed again, slow and weak. "Chained, so long, the stars, moving again." He pressed his hands over his ears, but it made no difference. The sound was within him. Fear shook his body, but deep down he felt something else. Sadness, a weight that was not his own. He curled up on the bed, whispering back without knowing why. "Who are you?" The voice did not answer, only a sigh, long and sorrowful, like wind through a cavern. The next morning, Jacob looked pale at breakfast, pushing his food around the plate. His father asked if he was sick, but Jacob said he was fine. Emily watched him carefully, noticing how his hands trembled when he reached for his glass of water. Later, when they were outside, she cornered him near the strange patch of land where they had uncovered the chains. He told her everything, the voice, the words, the sadness that had filled his mind. Emily's eyes grew wide, but instead of laughing, she nodded slowly. She admitted she had dreamed again of the golden eye, but in her dream the dragon had not been frightening. It had looked at her as though begging, not threatening. The two children stood quietly over the buried chains, the ground beneath their feet warm as if carrying the faint beat of a hidden heart. That night the voice returned, stronger than before. Jacob lay awake, listening, and this time Emily heard it too. She sat up in bed across the hall, gasping, because the words whispered inside her head as well. "So long, waiting, freedom, danger comes, soon." She clutched her blanket and hurried into Jacob's room, whispering in panic that she could hear it now too. The siblings sat together, trembling, listening to the broken sentences that drifted into their minds. When they asked who it was, the answer came clear and sharp: dragon, bound, betrayed. The children told their parents the next morning, but Anna laughed nervously, saying it was only dreams, while Mark frowned and warned them to stop telling stories. He didn't want trouble with the neighbors, who already seemed too curious about the land. But Emily noticed her father's jaw tighten, his eyes dark with worry, as if part of him feared they might be telling the truth. That evening, the neighbors came once again, bringing fruit and smiling too much. They asked if the children had been exploring the property, if they had dug anywhere unusual. Mark shook his head quickly, forcing a laugh, but the neighbors did not look convinced. One man leaned closer and said quietly, "The land is old. Best to leave the soil untouched." His smile never reached his eyes. When the neighbors left, Jacob whispered to Emily that he didn't trust them. He had seen the way they looked at the ground, the way their faces tightened when the word digging was spoken. Emily agreed. She asked Jacob what he thought the dragon wanted, and he told her the voice had shown him an image in the night, a sky filled with lights, ships descending, and fire raining down. He didn't understand it, but he knew the dragon was afraid of something. Emily asked if the dragon was dangerous itself, but Jacob could only shake his head. He didn't know. That night, the voice came stronger still. Both children lay awake, clutching each other's hands, as the words burned inside their minds. The stars move, chains weaken, they return, you must choose. Then images poured into their thoughts, a great war in the sky, fire across the land, and the dragon standing free, roaring against shadowed enemies that rained down from above. Emily began to cry softly, overwhelmed by the power of it, while Jacob sat frozen, his eyes wide in the dark. Suddenly, the earth trembled beneath the house, so faint their parents did not wake, but strong enough that the children felt it in their bones. From the field outside came a low, mournful sound, half roar, half breath, shaking the night air. They rushed to the window, and in the pale moonlight they saw the ground ripple, the soil rising and falling as though a giant chest lay beneath, struggling to breathe. The chains buried under the dirt glowed faintly, lines of light running through the links like veins of fire. Emily gripped Jacob's arm and whispered in terror, "It's waking." Jacob could not answer. His mind burned with the dragon's final words of the night, echoing louder than ever before. "Free me, or when they come, all of you will die." The days that followed grew heavier with unease. The Carters tried to live normally, fixing the house, clearing weeds, and meeting their new neighbors, but something was always wrong, always just out of sight. The voices still came at night, sometimes strong, sometimes faint, but always in the minds of Emily and Jacob. They didn't tell their parents anymore. Their father brushed it aside, and their mother said it was stress, but the children knew what they felt was real. The dragon beneath the ground was stirring, its chains glowing faintly in the soil, and the silence of the land felt more dangerous with each passing day. The neighbors came more often now. Too often. Sometimes with food, sometimes with excuses about checking on the family, but always with careful eyes that scanned the yard as though measuring where the earth might give way. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Emily saw two men from the neighboring farm standing by the fence, not speaking, just staring at the Carter's land. When she waved, they turned quickly and walked away without a word. It sent a shiver down her spine. Jacob was the first to say it aloud. "They know about the dragon." Emily had already suspected, but hearing it spoken made her chest tighten with fear. They decided to watch the neighbors secretly. That night, long after their parents had gone to bed, the children slipped out of the house and crawled across the tall grass toward the edge of the property. From a small rise they could see the neighboring homes. A lantern burned behind one of the barns, and shapes moved inside. The children crept closer, hearts hammering, and peered through a gap in the wooden boards. What they saw froze them in place. A group of neighbors stood in a circle, wearing dark cloaks, their faces lit by the flicker of lantern light. In the center of the circle lay a large book, old and worn, its pages filled with strange symbols. One of the men read aloud in a voice low and steady, the words unlike any language the children had ever heard. The others responded in unison, their tones grave and heavy. Emily grabbed Jacob's hand, squeezing hard, as she realized this was no simple gathering. This was a ritual. The leader closed the book and spoke in words they understood. "The chains still hold, but the time draws near. We must remain watchful. The dragon cannot be freed, or all will be lost." His voice trembled with urgency. Another neighbor, a woman with sharp eyes, asked, "What if the new family has seen something?" The leader's lips tightened. "Then we will know soon. And if they meddle, the chains must be renewed with blood." Emily stifled a gasp, and Jacob pulled her back quickly from the gap. They ran home without stopping, without looking back, hearts racing so fast they could barely breathe. Once inside the safety of their room, they clung to each other. The neighbors were not friendly guardians. They were hiding something dark. The next day, Mark noticed his children's nervous glances and pressed them to explain, but they kept silent, afraid of being punished, afraid their father might dismiss the truth again. Instead, they whispered only to each other. "They're keeping it chained," Emily said. "But why?" Jacob answered with what he felt deep inside, "Because they're afraid of it. Or maybe, they're afraid of what happens if it's free." That night, the voice returned, louder, clearer. "They betrayed me. They served the ones who bound me. I am not your enemy. They are." Jacob clutched his head, tears burning in his eyes as the words pounded inside his skull. Emily heard it too, though softer, and she begged the voice to explain. All it gave them was an image, a memory not their own, of tall figures in shining armor, not human, standing above the dragon as chains of light sank into its flesh. Behind those figures stood men who looked very much like their neighbors, bowing their heads in obedience. Emily woke from the vision trembling and sick. She whispered to Jacob that maybe the neighbors weren't protecting them at all. Maybe they were servants of something worse. Jacob agreed, though his voice shook. He said the dragon's pain was real, and he believed it when it said it wasn't the enemy. But how could they convince their parents? How could they free something so huge, so dangerous, even if it spoke like a friend? The next evening, Mark stepped outside to find 3 neighbors waiting by the fence. They smiled too politely and asked again if he had found anything unusual on the land. Mark forced a laugh, saying no, nothing but weeds and rocks, but their eyes lingered too long on the field where the chains were buried. After they left, he muttered to Anna that the neighbors were strange people, too interested in land that wasn't theirs. He didn't notice Emily and Jacob listening from the doorway, their hearts pounding with the truth they couldn't share. Later that night, the children couldn't resist sneaking back to the field. The moon was high, the chains faintly glowing again, and the earth beneath them pulsed like a heartbeat. They placed their hands on the soil, and the voice filled their minds instantly. "The watchers draw closer. My strength grows as the stars align. You must decide soon. Free me, or join them in chains." The words filled them with both dread and determination. They had seen the neighbors' secret, heard their cruel vows, and now they knew the truth. The land was not empty. It was a prison, and the guards were living right next door. The storm came without warning. Dark clouds rolled over the hills, swallowing the stars, and the wind screamed across the Carter family's land. Rain hammered against the roof, rattling the windows until the whole house seemed to shake. Mark and Anna rushed to pull buckets under leaks, but Emily and Jacob stood frozen at the window, their eyes fixed on the field. The ground glowed faintly through the storm, lines of fire tracing the hidden chains beneath the soil. With every bolt of lightning, the earth shuddered, and the children felt the dragon's voice thunder inside their heads. The chains weaken, the hour has come. Another lightning strike split the sky, slamming into the field with a deafening crack. The earth erupted, dirt and stones flying into the air, and a roar rose so deep it rattled the bones in their chests. The dragon's cry shook the storm itself, a sound of agony and power echoing across the valley. Emily screamed, Jacob grabbed her hand, and together they ran outside despite their parents' shouts. Rain drenched them instantly, but they didn't care. They could see the truth now. Massive shapes pressing against the ground, chains stretching and glowing as something beneath fought to rise. Mark rushed after them, pulling them back toward the porch, but Jacob shouted, "It's alive! It's real!" Lightning flashed again, and for an instant the form of a gigantic wing was visible beneath the soil, pressing upward before sinking back with a pained roar. Anna gasped, covering her mouth, finally unable to deny what her children had been saying all along. Mark shook his head in disbelief, but terror widened his eyes. Then came the neighbors. Lanterns bobbed through the rain as a group of cloaked figures hurried across the field, shouting strange words into the storm. They spread out around the glowing chains, chanting, their voices rising above the thunder. Emily clung to her father's arm, whispering that they had seen this before, that the neighbors were not friends but jailers. Mark wanted to run inside to lock the doors, but the earth groaned again, splitting open wider, and the dragon's eye shone through at last, brilliant gold, burning with pain and fury. The voice crashed into their minds, stronger than ever, "Free me, or you all perish." The ground shook violently, throwing the neighbors off balance. Some tried to drive metal rods into the soil, sparks of strange energy sparking where they struck, as if trying to seal the dragon back down. But the storm was against them, lightning striking closer and closer, rain flooding the ground. One man shouted to the Carters, "Stay back! For your lives, stay away!" But his warning rang hollow. Emily saw fear in his eyes, fear not of the dragon, but of what was coming. The dragon's golden eye fixed on her. She could not look away. In her mind she saw visions again, alien ships descending from the sky, fire raining on cities, people screaming as chains of light wrapped around not only the dragon but humans too. The voice echoed, "They are coming. I am your only hope." Emily staggered back, clutching her head, but Jacob stepped forward, shouting into the storm, "How do we free you?" The neighbors heard his voice and screamed in rage, charging toward him. Mark caught Jacob and pulled him back, but a cloaked woman pointed at them and yelled, "The children have been touched. They will betray us all." Before anyone could move, the earth cracked open with a blinding flash. A section of chain tore free, molten light spraying into the rain. The dragon roared again, and one enormous claw broke through the soil, dark and wet, its scales glowing faintly like hot iron. The neighbors scattered in panic, shouting their chants louder, but their fear was plain. The dragon's power was rising, and their control was slipping. Mark dragged his family back to the porch, shielding them as debris flew through the air. Anna sobbed, demanding answers, but Mark had none. The children clung to each other, trembling, as the dragon's voice spoke one final time that night, louder than thunder. "They will arrive when the storm ends. Choose now. Bind me again or free me to fight." And then, as suddenly as it had come, the storm began to fade. The rain slowed, the thunder rolled into the distance, and the glowing chains dimmed, though they still pulsed faintly beneath the ground. The dragon's claw sank back under the soil, its eye closing, but the air still vibrated with its presence. The neighbors regrouped, soaked and furious, their eyes burning with anger. The leader pointed at the Carters and shouted, "You have seen too much. Stay away from the chains, or you doom us all." Without another word, the cloaked figures retreated into the night, their lanterns vanishing into the rain. Silence fell heavy on the land. Mark turned to his children, his face pale, his voice shaking. "What is happening here?" Emily and Jacob said nothing, but they already knew. The storm had only been the beginning. The real danger had not yet arrived, and when it did, their family would be forced to decide whose side they were on. The morning after the storm, the Carter land lay in uneasy silence. Steam rose from the torn earth where the chains had glowed, and the grass around it was blackened as though fire had licked across it during the night. Mark stood on the porch staring at the field, his jaw tight, his hands shaking. He could not deny it anymore. Something alive and ancient lay beneath their home. Anna held Emily close while Jacob paced back and forth, restless, his mind still echoing with the dragon's voice. The children could not shake the memory of its words. "They will arrive when the storm ends." By noon, the neighbors appeared again, their faces grim, their cloaks hidden under plain coats now, but the fear in their eyes unmistakable. They warned Mark that his family must leave the land immediately, that they were not safe here. When Mark demanded answers, the leader only shook his head and said, "It is not for you to understand. Obey, and live." But Jacob couldn't stay silent anymore. He shouted that they knew about the dragon, that they had seen their secret meetings, that the creature spoke to them. Gasps rippled through the group of neighbors. One woman stepped forward, her face pale with dread. "Then it has chosen you," she whispered. "The choice will destroy us all." That night, the dragon's voice came again, stronger than ever, filling the children's heads with fire and sorrow. "They chained me for centuries. They served those who came from the stars. And now, they return. You must free me, or humanity will fall as it once did." Emily clutched Jacob's arm, terrified, but Jacob's eyes blazed with certainty. He told his sister that the dragon was not lying. He had seen its memories, felt its pain, and he knew the neighbors were not protectors at all. They were collaborators, servants of something worse. The next evening, the sky lit up with strange lights. At first they looked like shooting stars, but they grew larger, brighter, until the truth was clear. Ships, enormous and alien, descending through the clouds. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the ground, rattling the windows of the Carter home. The neighbors gathered in the field, their cloaks no longer hidden, their faces lit by the glow of the descending craft. Some fell to their knees, arms lifted as if in prayer. The leader shouted in a language the children did not know, but the sound made their skin crawl. The dragon roared beneath the earth, chains straining, soil splitting. Its voice thundered in their minds. "Now, free me, or they will bind you too." Mark grabbed his family, desperate to flee, but Jacob pulled away. "We can't run," he cried. "If we leave, the world will burn." Emily's eyes filled with tears, torn between fear and the weight of the choice before them. Anna sobbed, begging her children not to go near the beast, but the ground shook violently, throwing them all to their knees. The first alien ship landed at the edge of the valley, its surface black and gleaming, lights running like veins of fire along its sides. A hatch opened, and figures stepped out, tall, armored, their eyes glowing pale blue. They carried staffs that pulsed with energy, and with each step the ground seemed to shiver. The neighbors bowed low, murmuring in reverence. The leader cried, "The chains hold. The dragon still sleeps." But he was wrong. With a deafening crack, the soil split open. An enormous wing burst free, scattering dirt and stone like paper. The dragon's head followed, eyes blazing gold, its roar shaking the very air. Chains glowed red-hot around its body, still clinging, but weakening fast. The aliens raised their staffs, beams of light shooting toward the beast, tightening the bindings. The dragon shrieked in fury and pain, collapsing back but thrashing, wings tearing the ground apart. Jacob broke free from his father's grip and ran into the storm of dirt and light. Emily screamed his name but followed close behind. They threw themselves at the broken chains, pulling, clawing, their small hands useless against the glowing metal. But the dragon's voice surged inside them. "You are enough. Touch the light. Break it with will." Their hands burned as they pressed against the chains, but a power surged through them, a bond forming between human and dragon. The links cracked, light spilling out like fire. With a final cry, the children shouted together, and the chain shattered into dust. The dragon rose, higher than any building, scales blazing like molten gold, wings spreading wide to cover the field. The aliens stepped back, their glow flickering. The neighbors screamed in terror, some fleeing, others dropping to their knees. The leader shouted for the bindings to be renewed, but the dragon's roar silenced him, a sound that shook the valley and sent shockwaves rippling through the ground. The battle was instant and terrible. Beams of alien energy clashed with streams of fire from the dragon's mouth, lighting the night sky. The Carter family huddled together, watching in awe and terror as the creature they had uncovered fought against the beings who had enslaved it. Mark held Anna close, whispering in disbelief, "It's fighting for us." Jacob and Emily stood at the edge of the torn earth, the dragon's voice still echoing in their minds, not with pain this time, but with strength. "You chose well. I will not forget." The alien ships rose again, retreating into the sky, their beams dimming. The neighbors scattered into the forest, their loyalties broken, their power gone. At last, the dragon lifted its great head and looked down at the family. Its eyes, golden and burning, softened for just a moment. Then, with one final roar that echoed across the stars, it spread its wings and soared into the night, vanishing into the clouds. The land was left scarred, broken, silent. The Carters stood together, trembling, knowing nothing would ever be the same. They had uncovered a secret buried for centuries, and in freeing it, they had changed the fate of their world. Whether they had saved humanity or unleashed something far greater, only time would tell. But one truth remained certain: the land had never been empty. It had always been waiting.